it is quite severe, as you know. The second wave has already attained now a daily count which has exceeded what we saw in the first. The COVID deaths per million is also shooting up. So if you look at the trend, then with a lag of 3 to 4 weeks, as is normally the case with this virus, the deaths have also started to rise. And therefore, of course, we do take some comfort in the fact that we are not losing as many lives as, let's say, Europe is losing or the US has lost, etc. But I think that need not be our reference point right now. It has to be vis-a-vis our own first wave. But case fatality is also like a big macro view. We are sitting in the middle of the pandemic. So we have to, of course, worry about the fatalities, but we also need to worry about the spreading infections. Because it does become a predictor of future mortality.
Hello and welcome to this special interview. Today I have with me Professor Shamika Ravi. Thank you so much, ma'am, for doing this interview. Ma'am, how do you see the current second wave of coronavirus rise in this country today? How do you evaluate and assess the whole situation?
So thank you for having me, Shubham. It is quite severe, as you know. The second wave has already attained now a daily count which has exceeded what we saw in the first, and at a much faster speed. So I think we have to brace ourselves for a much worse second phase, but again, just like in the first wave, we knew that it's not uniform across the country. We have specific hotspots. Currently, those hotspots, if we define them as, let's say, a rate of growth, which is much faster than all India level, which means it is spreading much faster in those places, then they continue to be Maharashtra, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, and our union territories. I think we don't talk enough about the union territories, but even in the first wave, and as you're seeing even now, places like Chandigarh, Pondicherry, Lakshadweep is now almost, the whole of Lakshadweep is infected. Ladakh. So we are seeing that there are pockets where the problem is much more severe. And I think that is how the policy interventions, I think, must also prioritize therefore those areas rather than thinking of an equitable sort of a response across the country, because it's not the same. The severity is not the same everywhere.
So it's changing as per the geography of the country. Ma'am, you said it's worse than last year, I mean, the first wave. What do you mean by that? Is it just because of the sharp rise, because of the numbers, or is it also because of the mortality rate? Because some experts are saying that the mortality rate is lower, while the recovery rate is not lower. So there's a lot of confusion on that front also.
There should not be any confusion, first of all, when we say that, look, case fatality rate in India is much lower than in most countries of the West. So if we are looking at severity from a death point, then one thing to note is that we are not losing as many lives. Okay, that's number one. But case fatality is also like a big macro view. We are sitting in the middle of the pandemic. So we have to, of course, worry about the fatalities, but we also need to worry about the spreading infections, because it does become a predictor of future mortality. Now, at the moment, it is not just that the cases are rising daily much faster, and that is why I'm saying it is already quite bad from that perspective, but the deaths per million, the COVID deaths per million is also shooting up. So if you look at the trend, then with a lag of 3 to 4 weeks, as is normally the case with this virus, the deaths have also started to rise. And therefore, of course, we do take some comfort in the fact that we are not losing as many lives as, let's say, Europe is losing or the US has lost, etc. But I think that need not be our reference point right now. It has to be vis-a-vis our own first wave, where we did lose around 1.55 lakh lives. And now that the deaths per million has again begun to follow and rise along with the rising infection, we have to think of what can we do to prevent these loss of lives now.
Ma'am, you have been studying the numbers, the facts about rising cases and the related matter. last year we saw the kind of pressure or stress on the health infrastructure and the healthcare system of the country in all the states and union territories. This time, are we prepared, or we are also going to face the same situation that we faced last year?
Well, Shubham, the first time, remember, we went in for a preemptive lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike other countries, we went in a lockdown when we had, very few cases, but we knew the reality of our health infrastructure. So you could not have taken a chance by saying, "Dekhte hain kya hoga when the number rises, we prepare." Not an option for us, simply because in many parts of our countries, now remember, 75% of our health infrastructure is urban.
Yeah.
This pandemic has disproportionately been an urban problem, and particularly in the large metropolis, right? Because it has come from outside. The travel is such, quality, nature of lifestyle is such, there is a lot more mingling. So just like anywhere else, the big cities are much more prone to it. So that's, I think, important to remember. But with time, the different, it has spread to the eastern part of the country. It has begun to spread into rural areas, etc. But we are seeing that the second phase is also now happening in those similar sort of, similar cities. The same, Maharashtra remains a hotspot, just like in the first. Now, in the first case, the lockdown was for the reason that you needed to put a stop on mobility to stop the infection, or at least slow it down, so that it gave you time to prepare. And prepare for basic things like masks, PPEs, and of course, oxygen, bed, in hospitals, testing. Many of the states did not even have labs, ICMR approved, RT-PCR capabilities. Now, throughout the country, that is done. So I think in terms of preparation, we have seen the first wave. We have suffered that, which is where I think the second, wave, the country is prepared from the logistic point of view. But I think now the concern is, because there is no lockdown, are individuals and citizens taking the necessary precautions? The beds might be there, but how do we limit the number of people who will eventually use them? The social distancing, the kind of fear that was there, that is clearly missing now, Shiva.
So will it be right to say that this the second COVID wave will not be as problematic as the first one was, or will it be because of the sharp increasing cases?
Well, we saw in Europe that definitely it was pretty bad. Even there, of course, the number of lives lost were much more in the beginning. And subsequently, things were brought under control because you have more information. You know what should be the treatment protocol. We know that what should be the duration of the stay. So you prepare your infrastructure accordingly. But even though the deaths might not be that high, Shivam, the fact that the infection is spreading, it just puts us in a very vulnerable situation. Because now we are seeing that administration after administration, in some cases districts, in several cases you are seeing the state governments openly discussing night curfews or weekend lockdowns and so on and so forth. So I think, there will be some degree of trial and error. But I really think now the onus is, I think, on citizens, on individuals, that look, let us now curtail our, movement a little bit, be a little more responsible. And I think the state's response or the policy intervention now is to try and ramp up vaccination as much as possible.
I'm talking about vaccination. You have also tweeted and spoken about this. What do you think about the vaccination process itself? Do you think there's a lot of vaccination hesitant among the people? Are they willing to take it? Where are we failing on that front? How do you see that?
Traditionally, we have not had this kind of vaccine hesitancy.
Yeah.
If you consider that, unlike in the West, again, in some of the richest parts of the world, there have been movements against vaccines, and we have not seen that.
Yeah.
In fact, there is almost universal vaccination when it comes to polio. Parents trust, their children into getting these kind of vaccines. But this time around, it is a mixture of many factors, I think. One is the fact that globally we know that vaccines, even though third phase have happened for many of the vaccines and the data is public, but even third phase is limited with a certain sample. And generally, what has taken decades, now, mind you, what has taken decades is not just bureaucracy, but vaccines have also been tested over newer demographics, newer places, age groups, mortality, different kinds of morbidities.
Mhm.
This time around, everything is rushed. So, of course, the regulatory burden has been cut down. So, we are moving very fast in terms of giving approval for vaccine. But the testing is also of a limited nature.
Still.
So, there is some fear. For instance, now when there is fear that, look, the blood clots are happening with AstraZeneca, we are seeing that the enormity, or let's say the scale of that problem, is really very small. It is even smaller in US than it was in Europe, let us say. So with emerging, every day is bringing new evidence. But people don't know about that latest evidence and what should be a relatively comforting, kind of communication going out on a periodic basis. So I think there is a fear of unknown. That is number one. Number two, there is a lot of politics, unfortunately, involved as well. Now, that politics has to do with, of course, the politics of big pharma. I think there is, international sort of pressures for sort of achieving market share globally. You know that countries, the vaccine nationalism is absolutely a reality that big pharma and their respective countries are embroiled in. But there is also, I think, more local level politics. In the beginning, if you remember, several opposition leaders called it the BJP vaccine. The fact that, openly, many sort of misinformation, and this, unfortunately, we are in the day and age of misinformation.
Yeah.
And the only response to that has been, and that should be more and regular, transparent communication from the government and the regulator in vernacular, all the local languages and repeatedly. Now we know that a lot of the opposition leaders have also gotten vaccinated.
Yeah.
So I think, we have to unite at these times. These are truly national level problems. This is not a political problem. So I think we need to engage in more trust building as far as the vaccine is concerned. By the way, even in hospitals, and this is, of course, anecdotal data because it's not publicly available. But I am myself seeing, as I have visited some of the hospitals, that, several doctors are hesitant, a lot of nurses are hesitant. Even when I went to get my first shot, since we became eligible a few days back, lots of nurses were getting vaccinated along with me. And so I asked them, well, it has been now 2 months, you have been eligible. They said, we just wanted to wait and see.
Yeah.
So you see that wait and see is also a reality.
So, ma'am, talking about herd immunity, now last month, AIIMS director Randeep Guleria sir said that it's a myth. The perception itself is myth in this country. Looking at the numbers from the beginning itself, like you have been looking at the hard facts, do you think it is possible in India, or it's just debate or discussion? Ki, haan, it's just a myth. Ye possible nahi hai India mein. What do you think on that?
But that is everywhere, Shubham. And I'm not saying it's a myth everywhere. It's a phenomenon, which one has to understand that for an infectious virus of this nature, what is the percentage in the population that if they say that they have, or if they are tested to show antibodies, then we can say that now there is herd immunity. That itself is an empirical question. I'm not getting into the science of it. I'm just looking at, definitionally, we have been told herd immunity means X percentage. If they have in the population, then we know that
something around 80%, if I'm not wrong.
Well, that number keeps varying, Shubham.
Okay.
And it's likely that it will vary from country to country. Right? It depends on the nature of social interaction, how commonly do people mingle, and so on and so forth. It will also depend on the variant. Some variants are more infectious than others. Unfortunately, in our case, a lot of that data is not available. You see, even genome mapping data, recently what became available for Punjab, which showed a very high prevalence of the UK variant. We would like to know what is that for Bombay, let's say, Maharashtra. What is it for Chhattisgarh? What is it for overall Punjab and Chandigarh? What is it the case for the different union territories which are witnessing an exponential growth right now? So that data is not available. That's number one. Number two, the seroprevalence or the antibody prevalence data, I think that kind of survey has to be, it should, and perhaps it is, it's an ongoing, continuous process when we are in the middle of a pandemic. This information has to be made available, because other than, without that information, it's a lot like the elephant and six blind men or women. We know the definitions, but we also know that the Indian case might be different after all. At the end of the day, it has been less infectious in terms of, and less deadly if you just look at the number of deaths. So what is it? Is there an immunological sort of a response? There has to be more science and knowledge, research behind it. And without that, to call it, I would not call it a myth. I would just say that we have not done the research, and that data is not available, and we just don't know. But it's not a myth.
Ma'am, looking from the beginning itself, when the first lockdown was brought in the country, migrant crisis, economy had to undergo a lot of pressure, like job, everything. And now second wave have started. And also it's dangerous, as you have already pointed out. Do you think now it is time for a national lockdown or a phased lockdown? As you said, that it's a geographical problem, not everywhere, it's not uniform. What do you think on that? Are we dealing it in a proper manner? Do we need a full lockdown like it happened last year, or there is supposed to be some other way to deal with this?
No, Shubham, no national lockdown. I was opposed to it even then at a national level. But I do appreciate the fact that we were preemptive, because we knew the reality of our health infrastructure.
And also it was the first time.
It was the first time. Every country has been through trial and error. Right? So we did a trial, and I think we succeeded in large parts. The error has been in terms of loss of wealth, loss of value creation, which is the response on the GDP. But we also know now from the election data, etc., for instance, in Bihar, from where a lot of migrants you have seen in the western parts, when they went back, the election results are suggesting that the poorest people actually voted for the incumbent government, which is the NDA. Means to suggest that, look, they were disproportionately more impacted, but the humanitarian, the responses, the welfare response from the government in the first 5 months, remember when everybody was saying, where's the package, where is the economic package, the responses were all of the humanitarian nature, because it was very clear that the government had decided there will be no deaths on account of starvation. So, the food grains, the cash transfers, a lot of the targeted transfers were the priority in the beginning. And clearly it seems to have paid off in terms of people getting them and responding by basically voting for the incumbent party. But a lockdown is very expensive for a country like ours. We don't have the wherewithal of rich OECD countries that that can sustain us through long periods of lockdown.
But then how do we deal with the second wave?
It has to be much more precise. That's why when you get into the whole realm of precision policy making, you can't tie down an entire nation against, now we have enough information. It has to be targeted, localized response. Right? I mean, what is the reason? Why should we tie down UP and Bihar when there are fewer deaths and the infection is not? Even the second phase, the wave is much more in a few districts and a few states. So it is those districts and those states where I think we need to curtail movement and make sure that you have COVID protocols being adhered. You have to, get citizens to also shoulder the responsibility. Remember, a lockdown in the beginning was to prepare infrastructure. A lockdown now is because we want to stop the slow the growth. Because again, we are fearful that we have X number of beds. What if we need 3X now? But a better way to do that is to slow down and get people to maintain physical distances, etc.
I know, ma'am, we are short of time. Just last question. Someone who has studied and analyzed the whole situation from the beginning, someone like you are someone जिसके पास medias भी आते हैं, media persons come, different people come to see the numbers. What is your message to each individual today looking at the second wave in the country?
message is that, look, we are all in this together. The government will do what it can do, and that is why we are saying vaccination तेज करिए, vaccination का logistics improve करिए, age brackets को खोलिए, wastage बिल्कुल नहीं होनी चाहिए. But the दूसरा पहलू जो है उसका, the second side of the coin is citizens, us. Wear your mask, don't wear it on the chin. Stop having parties. If you don't have to go, please don't go. और वैक्सीनेशन अगर आपका एलिजिबिलिटी है तो प्लीज जाके वैक्सीनेट कराइए अपने आप को, पेरेंट्स को कराइए. जो वल्नरेबल हैं, ओल्डर पीपल, पीपल विद कोमॉर्बिडिटीज, बिल्कुल इंसिस्ट एंड एनकरेज दैट दे गेट वैक्सीनेटेड.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Fahad.